You know, a lot of the time while growing up, I'd find myself watching certain movies and just thinking, when is there going to be a movie that's going to be better than the Lord of the Rings trilogy? And by better, I mean in terms of storytelling, plot, characterization, cinematography, production design, the whole lot. Don't get me wrong, a lot of movies triumph against it in certain categories, but in my opinion, nothing comes close to the ambition and scale of these movies. The consistency maintained in each film, the delivery of the final product, all the categories of acting, directing, mise en scène, art direction, all tying neatly together. I think no film comes close to this, not even the sequels of the first film. Now, before you turn off this video or head to the comments section, I do love the Two Towers and the Return of the King, and I think each of them is unique and they both have a special place in my heart. I grew up on these films and have watched them an uncountable amount of times. I've also alternated with my decision on which film is the best, but I think after so many years of debating this with myself, I'm gonna have to go with the Fellowship of the Ring for multiple reasons. And so we're going to explore these today in this review. Hi, Omz here, and welcome to OmzLaw. To be honest, I've decided to take a break this week on the motion graphics. They kind of killed me last week, and just focus on editing, something I've been doing ever since I was 11. I'm hoping to also expand on this review and tackle the other two films as well, and I can only do that with your help by sharing this video as much as you can and following our social media platforms. I'd like to also take a moment to welcome and thank our new subscribers for all their support so far. Alright, so let's get to it. Why The Fellowship of the Ring is the best out of the trilogy. I think it's the best film ever, but I digress. For those of you who haven't seen the film or the trilogy, this is your first and final spoiler warning. I will be spoiling the whole thing. Sorry, but I kind of have to. And if you're wondering if I'm gonna be reviewing the theatrical version or the extended edition, you should be ashamed for even thinking that question. Feel ashamed. Also, this isn't a book review, so we're not gonna talk about the books. Since we're going to be looking at how the plot of The Fellowship of the Ring, the first of the three films, is the strongest out of the three, there will be no need to summarize the first without critiquing the structure directly. Again, this is your final spoiler warning. Leave now or forever hold your complaints. In my last video, I spoke about the three-act structure and how each plot point contributes to the protagonist's journey. Pause this video and check that one out if you're unfamiliar with the terms. It's pretty short and contains helpful tips if you're a storyteller or a scriptwriter. Link is in the description. If you're also enjoying the content on this channel, don't forget to subscribe. Alright, enough wasting time, let's get on with it. The Fellowship is formatted almost perfectly with the three-act structure, and it's not like the other two films aren't. The Two Towers falls short with the tempo, wasting time with Treebeard, whereby almost little to no plot or character development happens. Fake out deaths and overstating how hopeless it is.
It's hopeless!
They say that it is hopeless.
You're hopeless.
And by the end of it, we're kind of back to where we started. Frodo and Sam end the Fellowship of the Ring on their way to Mordor, and in the Two Towers, they're still on their way there. Granted, their relationship has somewhat changed and now they have a new companion, but come on, 3 hours and 40 minutes later and that's it? That's almost 5 episodes of television. Merry and Pippin get stuck with Treebeard and the only thing they manage to really accomplish is to trick the Ents into attacking Isengard. Most of the character development seems to happen to Aragorn, who's also robbed of that due to Gandalf's return, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The Return of the King suffers from the same problems, with multiple endings that don't seem to end, a bloated middle act. Yes, it is the best battle to ever occur along with Helm's Deep, the second film, the best cavalry charge and simply the best CGI that still holds up years later, but it does occupy a significant portion of the runtime. And again, our main characters seem to be somewhat absent from all this. Sure, Aragorn needs to go get another army, and Gandalf and Pippin are protecting the city and the last living heir to the stewardship of Gondor respectively. Because the characters are separated, we spend a lot of time re-establishing the world and the stakes, introducing new characters, and getting through the major plot events like battles and politics. The Fellowship does not fall victim to all these, and when you think about it, it's the film that had to do the most in the shortest running time, almost 3 hours and a half. It had to establish the whole world, Middle-earth and its history, the races of elves, dwarves, wizards, and hobbits, the languages, the stakes, the ring, Sauron, Saruman, the protagonist and the flaws, the 9 companions. It's not like the other 2 films don't do this. The cast expands and gets more diverse and interesting. But Fellowship is the film that does this in the most economical way. It uses every scene to build the world, develop the characters, and raise the stakes. It keeps up the pace, introducing something new at every turn. Granted, we do have this long side mission with Cate Blanchett, but I do find this scene crucial in showing us the fallout from Gandalf's death. Besides this, and Sam's drowning scene, and some of the shots in Hobbiton, I feel that it maintains a near perfect pace, not overstaying its welcome, and not rushing it. It's a shame that the same can't be said for another fantasy series that inspired from this one. But I digress. Now let's look at the plot. In the opening sequence of Fellowship, we're first introduced to the Ring of Power, the other rings, Cate Blanchett, Agent Smith, the Dark Lord Sauron, an evil war that went on because of said ring, the victory of men and elves, the greed of man, the antagonist of the series, the main one of Return of the King in my opinion, the protagonist's uncle, and this all happens in almost 7 minutes. Sure, it's narration, but it's done really well. Of course, we could have done without it, but in a way, this is the only time we see Sauron in his former glory. We do flash back to the scene later on, but we never see Sauron in this form in the present events of the films. We just see him as this eye creature that's far away, almost half a continent. Yes, his influences are present everywhere, especially with how the ring affects Frodo, but we never get any one-to-one engagement between him and our protagonist, except maybe in this scene. And this one. I think the intro gives us some perspective to the villain and the previous stakes, but of course I can't imagine the film doing without it. In fact, I think it would be more interesting. I think it'll make the moment of us meeting the ring for the first time more mysterious. That, however, is not the format that this series chooses to take on, and it's something that I respect a lot. The opening sets the tone for this world. It establishes a new style for the fantasy genre, and makes the audience instantly aware of what they're getting themselves into. I don't consider this to be a part of the first act. In a sense, it's kind of like a prologue or an opening scene that's independent from the rest of the film or the plot that's occurring in the present. We could essentially start the film with Frodo sitting in the forest, thereby accomplishing the first plot point in the 3-act structure. Definitely one of the most elaborate exposition scenes in cinematic history, both in terms of the level of authenticity and the runtime itself. This thing definitely stretches. We're introduced to everything. Gandalf is in town, he's weird, he's funny, he arrives precisely when he needs to. He does fireworks, he smokes pot. Yeah, Gandalf's awesome. We need Bilbo writing his book, and I think Peter Jackson might have stretched this one out for a bit. And I personally think we should have started with Frodo, or seen Frodo go through the town as Bilbo narrates his story. Anyways, it's his birthday, he hates people in general. With Gandalf writing in, Frodo mentions that there's something off about Bilbo. A bit on the nose foreshadowing, but a classic example of using one of the plot devices. Hobbiton establishes the beauty and simplicity of living in peace, living with the earth. A laid-back life. This contrasts with the rest of the series and almost with all of the other places in Middle-earth. The film here shows us what Frodo is about to lose as he travels on this journey. We'll talk about stakes later, that's definitely gonna need a paragraph on its own. Since Bilbo would rather be left alone than to receive any more visitors or well-wishers and be able to finish his book, he decides to leave in the most outlandish and attention-seeking way possible. Oh, and we're introduced to Merry and Pippin. And Sam, who's the real hero of the story. I'm sure most fans will agree. Gandalf suspects something's up, forces Bilbo to keep the ring behind, and so we arrive to the inciting incident. The moment Frodo picks up the ring. You can also argue that the inciting incident could be Bilbo's little trick, but I think that is the point of attack. The point of attack in theater is the moment by which all of the events are set in motion. It is also the moment whereby the protagonist makes the first choice. However, it doesn't have to be that way. In film, the point of attack acts as a plot device to setting the events in motion. However, this is outside of the protagonist's first choice or the inciting incident. And this is where Frodo makes the first choice. In spite of loving his home, clearly not looking for adventure, he takes the ring to the prancing pony. Well, first Gandalf has to go halfway across the world to read a book and then come back and confirm that it's the Ring of Power. We also find out that Gandalf can't touch this thing, because if he does, he'll turn into something like this.
You would have a queen, not dark but beautiful and terrible as the dawn.
We're still in the first act, and now we understand that not everyone can hold on to this thing, let alone touch it. We saw what it did to Isildur, some creature, and Bilbo. This reveal also highlights the strength of the hobbits. Bilbo, having had the ring for years, is still pretty normal. Somewhat. Sam comes along for the ride. They have some second thoughts when Gandalf leaves them. They walk and see some wood elves. These plot points count as discoveries rather than obstacles. But this is also foreshadowing to the Grey Havens and Frodo's leaving. Sam even mentions that it makes him sad. Gandalf heads to Isengard and we're introduced to the one and only Christopher, I can't believe they cut out your death scene in the Return of the King Lee, or Saruman the Wise, the sketchy yet appearing very friendly white wizard. They talk about the ring, he scolds him for smoking pot, and then in a sudden unexpected turn of events, a mini reversal you might say that initiates the rising action, he betrays Gandalf, tells him to join the bad side, but Gandalf refuses and is thrown on a roof. Saruman begins building an army for Mordor, and we finally arrive to the end of Act 1. For Gandalf at least. Again, something has happened here that defines the beats or the rising action of the second act. At least the first part of the second act. Frodo and Sam meet up with Merry and Pippin, and they encounter the Ringwraiths, barely escaping with their lives. And this also marks the end of Act 1 for Frodo's journey. Looking at the structure of the first act, it's amazing how much it follows the typical Hollywood structure. We know everything we need to know so far about our characters, their wants, their needs. In the case of Frodo, someone who has never had any adventure, thrust into a world he doesn't understand. Sam, a gardener, is given the responsibility to tend to Frodo's needs, make sure he's safe. Gandalf, a character who tries to do good and denies taking the ring, is betrayed by his closest ally and manages to escape being killed. We know about the ring, wizards, hobbits, elves a bit, men also not a lot. We know our main antagonist, or at least one of them. We also have some comedic relief characters, other evil dudes, some creature that might be important. We know about the world Middle-earth, some of the places like the Shire, Isengard, Mordor, the Misty Mountains. This is a lot, to be honest, and this all occurs under 1 hour. Fellowship of the Ring designs every scene to convey as much information as possible while moving the plot along. Yes, some of it is on the nose, a lot of it is, but hey, it had to establish the fantasy genre, something that we'll definitely discuss in another video. I think we all knew deep down that this review wasn't going to fit in one video, and unfortunately, I'm out of time for this week. Are we gonna Peter Jackson this review and stretch it out into a series? You bet we are. I'll see you guys next week. Please share and like this video if you enjoyed it. It'll really help me with growing this channel. You can also follow me on my social media platforms. And as always, thanks for watching.